Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So Derek got a fun and exciting video for you guys today because I am testing out the recently updated Sharp X68000 core on MiSTer FPGA. And I would say of all of the cores in development, the number one leading the poll as far as what people love to see get finished is the X68000. Probably because one, the hardware is incredibly expensive to actually purchase, and two, if it isn't fully recapped and the power supply changed out, it is also a repair nightmare. And even though this core is not done, even in its most recent revision, and it actually has some new bugs I haven't seen before, it's always nice to get an update, and this one definitely brings in some good new features. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And honestly, the X68000 core has a very interesting history because a lot of different developers pick this thing up, kind of add to it, and then other people kind of just take over their work at some point in time. So this recent update comes from a user on the MiSTer Discord. It's called Alpconde, at least I believe I'm pronouncing that right, and it's bringing in a ton of fixes on the different disk formats and the core in and of itself. So now you're going to be able to load up more games in more different ways, and there have been some improvements in the overall display and aspect of the visuals. If you take a look at the top here, you're going to see that top bar no longer has a bunch of graphical corruption, which I will show you a previous version of the core of in just a moment. But substituting that, when there's any sort of sprite rotation on the screen, like that original tree in the beginning, you do get some pixelated horizontal lines going through the image. So it is one of those things. It's kind of like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But honestly, that's kind of been the story of the Sharp X68000 core development. For every improvement we get, something seems to regress. And even though the X68000 processor on this thing has been something that's been dialed into MiSTer FPGA for years now, there is a ton of custom hardware on an X68000, so it is still tricky. Now looking at a previous version of the core, you'll see here that you do have that corruption in the top end of the screen. You can see those clouds kind of drawing where they shouldn't be, but if some of these trees actually come down, you don't have the horizontal lines. So let me comment down below and you tell me, improvement or not, I would be curious. But there's so many amazing games that you can play on the X68000 core today, and some of them you'd actually have no idea this core was still in development. And that is because, like any sort of PC, it has so many different bits of hardware and so many different functions. So one game may be using all of the hardware in a way that you would have no idea it's in active development and doesn't have any issues, or another game could be using a certain aspect or function of the hardware or a call to some chip that isn't 100% dialed in and coded perfectly for the FPGA core yet, and that's how you end up seeing graphical corruption. And of course, a PC just basically has more functions than anything like a console would, because it isn't just sitting there running games, even though the X68000 is most famous for that. You could use an X68000 computer as a word processor to send email and anything else a computer would actually do. So that really is the hard thing about PC cores versus console cores or handheld cores. There's so much more multifunction, so you end up in situations where you have to have everything dialed in perfectly, or you could end up with glitches in a game. But something like Cotton here on the X68000 core, if there's anything wrong with this version of the game, I would have absolutely no idea, and I don't think you would either. And that really is kind of the part and parcel aspect of what's going on with the X68000. It just depends on what game you play as to what result you're going to get. But I would say too, as far as unfinished PC cores are concerned, all of the Japanese computers are still kind of sitting around pending. The X68000, the PC98, stuff like the FM10s, those things basically have functionality, but they don't really do everything you need them to do. But I would say by far the X68000 core is the furthest along, and with this new update, minus a few graphical glitches, it is going to function ever so slightly better. Although you will see there is still some horizontal lines in some of Cotton's actual attacks there, the specials. But it is one of those things, not anything here is really going to affect your gameplay and overall fun. It's just going to be a situation where you have some graphical glitches, where other games still on the core, if you try to boot them up, they do absolutely nothing, or will freeze in the first like 5 or 10 seconds, or have some really bad corruption. Let's go into the first of 2 soundtrack samples. We're going to do some MIDI in Castlevania here, because the MIDI music here in Akamaju Dracula is so good. So go ahead and listen, I'll come back and show you some more X68000 games. I mean, MIDI on the X68000, one of the most fun functions you can have on MiSTer FPGA, in my opinion, with the actual MT32 Pi hat when it comes to MIDI emulation. But moving over to another game that has MIDI support, but I'm going to go with the actual FM sound on this soundtrack sample, obviously Ghouls and Goes. And there's so many different versions of this game to play. Honestly, you don't even really need to play the X68000 version because we have quote-unquote better versions available, but it is still an absolute vibe and it is still an incredible conversion. And this is a game that I have sat down and played start to finish on the X68000 core, and I didn't really see anything, hear anything, or otherwise have any issues where I would think it wasn't doing anything other than what a real X68000 would do. And if you know me and the channel, you know I love my esoteric hardware, but even I don't own an X68000 just because they're incredibly expensive, and I really have always wanted one, but I always kind of pull myself back from the brink when it comes to taking my wallet out of my pocket and actually paying for it, because I've always been waiting for this core to get finished, and I still do feel like that is going to happen one day. But the development history of the X68000 core is probably more interesting than any other core on MiSTer, just because so many different hands have touched it. There's so many different developers in the mix, some that come and go, some that only talk on Japanese forums. It really is difficult. And another difficult thing is if you don't read and speak Japanese, a lot of the development docs and other actual manuals for the X68000 are only in kanji. When you're trying to understand exactly what the hardware does, you need to be able to read that first, and that can definitely be a challenge. Let's go into the second soundtrack sample here, and this is going to be on the FM sound chip, not on MIDI, so go ahead and listen, hear the difference, and I'll be right back with a few more tests. Just absolutely a classic soundtrack and a classic game to play, but moving over to another X68000 classic, and another one that has a quote-unquote better version available on the arcade side of things with the Capcom CPS core from Hotego. Obviously this is Final Fight, and like I like to say in every single video that I feature Final Fight in, if you don't play as Mike Hagar, you're not playing the game correctly. But all Hagar related jokes aside, I take him as our mayor of Chicago because our current mayor is absolutely an idiot. I absolutely love this game, and it is another one on the current core that I have played through start to finish and really haven't seen any issues with whatsoever. And that really is the perplexing thing about the X68000 core. You might not even realize it isn't done, just depending on what game you're actually playing. Then you'll pick a game that absolutely just looks like it is completely graphically corrupted on screen and won't load past like maybe the first level or so. And as to why that is, again, it's just different functions and calls to the hardware, because there is a metric ton of hardware on board an X68000, because again, it is a full PC compared to something like a PlayStation 1. Sure, still complicated, but the amount of silicon on board is less, and its functions are very streamlined just for a console. So that can definitely be a little bit of a challenge, but it's a challenge that seems to be overcoming itself in kind of small steps. I'm sure this will still be in development in a year or so, but hopefully we're getting towards the finish line. But one more soundtrack sample, MIDI this time with the actual menu, and I'll be right back with more. I just love the developers at Konami actually gave you that little equalizer there to see what every single channel was doing. And if you don't have the MT32 Pi hat for MiSTer FPGA, it absolutely still sounds great on the FM sound chip, but it's one of those things. I absolutely recommend MIDI for MiSTer if you want to play around with this stuff. And don't forget, it also works in the A0486 core, so you can have a lot of MIDI on DOS games that definitely work a little bit more consistently than the X68000 core. but this is the core more so than any other I would love to see finished by the end of the year, even though I don't expect it. And the reality is, this is all volunteer time from different developers, so you should never expect anything to get done on any time frame. It kind of really is a when it's done scenario, and when the people that work on it have extra time. But this most recent update's definitely worth checking out. It is just on the MiSTer FPGA Discord server right now under the Sharp X68000 channel. I'm not sure if it's pinned or not, but it's one of those things. The chat doesn't get all that much use, so you just go ahead and look for the most recent RBF file, download it, and pop it on your MiSTer FPGA and try it out. And it is a fun test core, definitely showing some improvement. And I would say in some games it feels like the X68000 core is complete, and in other games it feels like it's 90% complete, and in some games it feels like it absolutely doesn't work whatsoever. But that's the development process. It's always fun, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye bye.